It was a cold December afternoon, 1984, when I stepped out of the hotel into the winter chill of New York City. We were a few days away from the start of a new year, less than a month from the start of the second Reagan administration. The San Francisco 49ers were on a collision course with their second Super Bowl victory, and I was on my way to the biggest match of my life. Just 3 days before, all the good boys and girls of the world had woken up to find the toys of their dreams wrapped beneath their Christmas trees. Santa Claus didn't visit the homes of bad guys, especially like Dr. D. Tonight, however, was my Christmas. I was working for the biggest wrestling company in the world, and I was about to face the biggest wrestling star in the world. Don't call me fake. Pro Wrestling's original bad boy, Dr. D. David Schultz. Sit back and relax here on Guardian of Chaos, the YouTube channel for Chaos Corner. Drop an elbow on that like button. I am the Midnight Chaos Ryder, sitting in as host until the Guardian of Chaos Big Daddy can settle his appeal with YouTube. If you've been following along here on the channel, then you know what the fuck I'm talking about. This is our story, our storyline here on the channel. Dusty Rhodes had his Midnight Rider back in the 80s, and Big Daddy has his Midnight Rider, and that's me, the Midnight Chaos Rider. One man, unique, unedited, unscripted, raw dog for you, the fans. Emotional investment, storytelling, psychology. That's what you get here on this show, because this isn't a podcast. It's a show where we have our own storylines. So thanks for being here. I can't appreciate you guys and gals enough. And until we get this dispute settled with YouTube, I'll be here and you'll be following along on this storyline. Sit back and relax. Grab a snack, grab a beverage. Shout out to my mods, my brother from another mother, Austin Nance, and of course, the OTS Tribal Queen. Now, Big Daddy and I look alike. We sound similar. We have the same mannerisms. And we're in the same place at Chaos Headquarters. But for all intents purposes, we are not the same person. Open up your mind to storytelling. That's why this channel is unique. No better, just different. So you're better off when you walk out of here than when you walked in here. So you could hold a conversation the next time you're at a venue, a sporting event, with your friends, your family, in a restaurant, a pub, a tavern, no matter where you are. Don't call me fake. The real story of Dr. D. David Schultz. Now, you know Big Daddy's background. Not only 25 years behind the walls, repo man, private bodyguard, security, for everyone that you can think of, from John Cena to Metallica. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. And also worked as a bounty hunter for Dr. D. David Schultz. Let's get back to story time here on the channel. I could see thousands of fans in line outside the building as I approached the arena, braving the cold to pay a steep ticket price for one of the biggest wrestling events of all time. I passed dozens of reporters and photographers from around the world as I tromped around the building to the security entrance. Cameras whirred and clicked, and photographers called out my name. Some words were kind. Some nearby fans called out to me as well. Others were not so kind. Matter of fact, they were downright murderous. It was par for the course for the baddest bad guy in the business as I walked into the building. I've got to run to keep from hiding. You get it, right? I got one more silver dollar, but I'm not gonna let them catch me, no. Not gonna let them catch the Midnight Ryder. The noise and hustle of the fans and reporters outside faded as the double doors of the building shut behind me. There were fewer people in the hallway than outside, but the action was twice as fast. Men with headsets chattering, men running miles of TV cables, men in suits making their rounds, preparing for an event that would be televised all over the world. Now, this was not a house show in Corning, New York. This was Madison Square Garden, the mecca of professional wrestling, and the world would be watching. I entered the dressing room with my bag in hand, and as always happened for sure with Dr. D. I was 6'5" and 280 pounds of blue twisted steel and sex appeal, with a well-earned reputation as one of the most dangerous men in the business. You could hear a pin drop as I walked to the bench and set down my bag. The Iron Sheik was the first to move. He walked over and extended his right hand. "Hello, Doc. How are you?" The Iron Sheik. I greeted him warmly in return as Mr. Fuji walked up behind him. "Arigato. From the Midnight Rider-san. Konnichiwa, bitches." "Hello, Doc," and Fuji and I shook hands. The Samoans were next. Then one by one, the others completing the locker room ritual as old as our business. The mood began to mellow, and people went back to their pre-match routines. I reached down and unzipped my bag, unpacked my gear, and beginning my own preparations. I'd faced some huge names in more than a decade of traveling around the world. But on that particular night, I would step into the ring to wrestle, maybe even shoot, with a man I considered to be the very best in the world. A man who had faced not only the best our business has to offer, but arguably the greatest fighter of the 20th century. Debatable. As I started to prepare mentally for what was yet to come, my mind drifted back to the long road I traveled to come to this place. I remembered the long hours driving the back roads of Tennessee to Herb Welch's barn, where the old man would stretch me until I could barely move. I remembered the long drives back to the house, the painful walk from the car in the wee hours of the morning when my wife Peggy would have to come and help me stagger through the front door, and the early wake-up call when I'd go to my day job and start all over again. I thought back to my earliest days working for Henry Rogers in that Malden, Missouri department store, spending $30 to make $25 for working 3 matches a night. I thought about riding the roads of Tennessee with Dennis Condrey, and Phil Hickerson, enjoying the sunrise of Florida and enduring the long, frigid drives across the provinces of Canada. Having come from nothing, being raised in a dirt park poor of rural Tennessee, I considered every sacrifice to be a small price to pay, in the hopes that one day I might be able to provide a better life for myself, my wife Peggy, and my daughter. I had paid my dues in full, and I had secured a spot with the first truly national wrestling promotion. I was already making more money than I had ever made in my life, and now I was preparing to face the man who had allegedly shortened the career of the great Muhammad Ali, Japanese legend Antonio Inoki. If all went well, there was no limit where I might go. The door of the locker room flew open, and once again the room fell silent. This was a different silence, not the respectful silence due to a world-class bad guy, but the fearful silence that took over when the boss walked in the room. There wasn't a hair out of place on his head. His clothes were immaculate, yet something was off that night. You could see in his face he was angry, agitated. Something was wrong, and he was headed my way. He extended a hand my way. "Hello, David." I wasn't Dr. D to him. I was always David. "Hello," I said. He got right down to business. "David, there's a reporter here making a joke out of the business. I want you to do an interview. They're going to interview you. I want you to tear his ass up, blast him, stay in character, be Dr. D, tear his ass up." Vince McMahon Jr., the mastermind behind the World Wrestling Federation, walked to the door. He paused before leaving and turned back to me. "We'll call you." And then he left. We got to make sure the idea, the identity, the whereabouts is unknown to YouTube, who's had their foot on our throat for months. This is why I had never heard of John Stossel before that night, but in the following years, I would get to know more than ever I wanted to about the man. The ABC News reporter was a do-gooder, a whistleblower. I'm sure he did a lot of good for some people. And I know he had faced hostile interviews before, but he was in dangerous territory that night at Madison Square Garden. And if I seem a little off kilter, it's for a reason. And I know that you know that. He had come to the hallowed halls of Madison Square Garden to expose the business that I and everyone else in that locker room had sworn to protect. Kayfabe was alive, unlike here in 2025. A decade before, Vince McMahon threw kayfabe out of a courtroom window. He wanted to be the guy to pull back the curtain and expose the Wizard of Oz. He wanted to prove it was fake. He should have known better. I had no idea he had already spoken with a former tag team partner of mine. I wasn't aware of the interviews he had conducted with other members of the WWF roster. All I knew was I had my orders. Blast him. Tear his ass up. That should tell you fans what you need to know about Dr. D. David Schultz and John Stossel and what went down at Madison Square Garden that night. This is history. This is why you're here, to learn facts. Not views and thoughts and opinions. Factual information is what's presented here on this channel. Vince had long told me I was going to be the #1 heel in the company. I was to be mean, nasty, belligerent, the baddest man in a locker room full of bad guys. He didn't have to tell me to tear his ass up. When he said, be Dr. D, it was already implied. Herb Welch taught me to wrestle the old-fashioned way. He taught me to protect the business, a business that my family and I had come to depend on for our livelihood. Wrestling was my job. I had been taught to protect the business from day one when my boss, whether it was Stu Hart, Vern Gagne, or Vince McMahon, told me to do what I had been trained to do. I did as I was told. Promoters knew they could count on me to get their dirty work done. In my mind, this was just part of the job. Knowing I was going to be on camera, I went to the sink and wet my hair down. I walked out into the hall where a number of wrestlers were already standing around waiting for what was to come. Everyone heard my conversation with Vince, and they wanted to see the doctor take care of things. It's worth noting, if you've seen the video, that there are no baby faces in sight. I believe Fuji was in the background. I believe the Sheik was in the background, among others. I walked into the hall, as I said, and there were no faces. It was worth noting. That's because even in 1984, here in the Time Machine on Chaos Corner, the #1 rule was to protect the business, unlike today where everything is exposed. And that's just a fact. You think the business is better now than it was in the 70s and the 80s? Well, then you got your head up your ass. Listen to someone who's been there. Started his journey in 1983. Started his pro wrestling training in 1984, for however brief it was. And then made my debut in 1991 as a manager who took the fucking bumps. You get it? That's because even in 1984, as I said, the #1 rule was to protect the business. It wouldn't do to have 2020 cameras catch Hulk Hogan joking and chatting in the same hallway. Certainly not in the same hallway with Dr. D. We dressed in separate locker rooms, the heels and the babies. And when 2020 arrived that night, we were all told to stay in character at all times. The man who first put a microphone in my face that night was not Stossel. But when he approached, I assumed he was the man Vince said would interview me. He started asking me questions, and staying in character, I was short with him. How do you like the business? It's a great business. I really like it. We went back and forth for a bit, just like that. The guy was getting frustrated with me, and that's when John Stossel himself stepped in. I can't handle this guy, the reporter said. I'll take care of this, said Stossel. I'm sure you've seen the video of me in character answering Stossel's questions leading up to the moment when I smacked him. What you don't get from the video is that John Stossel actually started the interview over twice. He wasn't getting what he wanted the first 2 times, but by starting over again and again, it was clearly trying to push me to get more agitated. By the third go-round, I had more than enough of John Stossel. Stossel said, "Is this a good business?" Doc, "Yeah, it's a good business. I wouldn't be in it if I wasn't. If it wasn't." Stossel, "Why is this a good business?" Doc, "Because only the tough survive. That's the reason you ain't in it. And this punk holding the camera, that's the reason he ain't in it. The reason these rednecks ain't in it. Because it's a tough business." Stossel, "Well, that's terrific." Doc, "What? Is that all you got?" Stossel, "I'm going to ask you the standard questions, you know." Doc, "Standard question?" Stossel, "I think it's fake." Doc, "Oh, you think it's fake?" And that's when it happened. I smacked him. And I didn't smack him as hard as I could, but he still went down in a heap. "What's that? Is that fake?" That's what I said. "What's the hell wrong with you? That's an open hand slap, boy, huh? You think that's fake?" Stossel started to stand. I smacked him with the other hand, and he fell down again. That's when he turned, tucked his tail between his legs, and ran. Mr. Fuji never flinched. The Iron Sheik never flinched. None of the wrestlers in the hallway flinched. When people ask me if I was put up to it, that's the evidence I give them. Nobody was shocked. Nobody was shaking their heads. They don't know the slap was coming. They didn't know it. But they heard what Mr. McMahon had told me to do. Blast him. Tear his ass up. That's what McMahon said to the doctor. So you know that McMahon's a pathological liar, and we know his history since then. He's lying now. He's lying yesterday. He's lying tomorrow. And he lied back then on that night in Madison Square Garden in 1984. This is why I present this. I hope your notebooks are out. Because this is kayfabe. This is what the fuck I'm talking about. You feel the intensity, the motivation, the passion, because that's what I relay to you from this incident. And on this channel. And especially in the story that we're telling on this channel. This is for you, YouTube. I was already known as one of the roughest men in the business, but that incident earned me the title of the most dangerous man in wrestling. It solidified my reputation as a badass and a tough guy that follows me to this day. I went back into the locker room and finished my preparations for the night. I was supposed to go on last in the main event, but in a surprise move, I was told I was going on first. In spite of the short notice, I can honestly say I had the match of my life against Antonio Inoki. The fans ate it up, while reporters from around the globe snapped away at ringside. No one watching that night had a clue what had happened in the back, but as soon as the match was over, the boss came to see me again. "David, Stossel wants to have you arrested," said Vince. "Get your bags and get going. Great work tonight." "These are the facts. This is the truth." "Do some research. Go back and check out the video. Investigate this. And then come back here and rewatch this. And you'll know what the fuck I'm talking about. And I apologize for the cussing." I didn't have time for a shower or to change out of my gear. I threw my things into the bag and headed for the exit. There was already a considerable amount of activity backstage as I slipped out the back door and headed to the Howard Johnsons in Manhattan. I had no clue that my run-in with John Stossel would not only become my legacy, but the beginning of the end of my wrestling career. I would be gone in a matter of weeks, forced out just prior to the biggest wrestling show of all time, WrestleMania. The Stossel incident also indirectly set me up on a path of a life wilder and crazier and more unbelievable than any professional wrestling could have ever given me. Just a few years later, I collected my first bounty when I captured a member of the notorious Diablos biker gang. In less than a year's time, I was making headlines and doing TV appearances again. This time, the subtitle beneath my name didn't read professional wrestler. It read bounty hunter. And as I already told you guys, the G.O.C, Big Daddy, and me, we worked for David D. Ran all the way down to Nashville, Tennessee, and sat outside some guy's house for 5 days. Until he came home, umbriaga, at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And my partner, Big Bird, went to the back door and I went to the front door. And we hammered it in with sledgehammers. Walked into the apartment, the house, if you will, with kids lying there on the floor on the couch. No sign of the perp, the man we were sent there to collect. Ran upstairs. There's 2, 3 bedrooms. Where do you go? Which one do you choose? If you take that one, does somebody else come out? Does he come out of there and maybe flat blast right in the back, right in the back of the head? No. I picked the right room and found him underneath the bed. We dragged him out, chained him up, and threw him in the back of my tow car all the way back to the Constitution State. Wanted for beating somebody to death with a baseball bat. Or the nights at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning in Brooklyn, the Bronx, Queens, trifling and ruffling through crack houses in the long Ryder jacket. Hence the Midnight Chaos Ryder, kicking in doors in crack houses, looking for suspects. You see this person? When's the last time you seen this one? No? Okay, on to the next tenement building. And them's the facts. Not only there, not with only Dr. D, but with the high court sheriffs in different towns. From Bridgeport to West Hartford and every place else, and supposedly the shadows of Titan Towers in the greater New England tri-state Northeast area. So you know what the fuck I'm about. Do you feel it? Do you smell it? There's a different intensity here today at Chaos Corner. I became the guy, along with yours truly, who shows up at your door at 3 a.m. to haul your ass back to jail after you've jumped bond. Now you guys know the history of 25 years behind the walls. I already said it. I'm repeating myself. And remember, this right here on this channel is theater and opera mixed with truth and reality. I've already said it. Emotional investment, psychology, storytelling. Kayfabe is alive here at Chaos Corner. It's all for a reason. Just remember that. I hope you're enjoying it. Leave a comment. Say something. And if you don't like it, I'm still gonna do it. You can change the fucking channel. I became the guy with the network of informants spending hours at a time in parked cars and hotel rooms on stakeouts, waiting and watching for some of my prey. I've tracked down drug dealers, murderers, gang members, sleazy politicians, you name it. Now you know where the G.O.C. is coming from. Long before he ever met pro wrestling's original bad boy. We're the same mold, the same people. And time doesn't change that. The name Dr. D may not be as familiar to wrestling fans today, but it sure as hell became famous in the underworld. I hunted wanted men and women from Connecticut to Los Angeles to Puerto Rico to Egypt, racking up a cumulative caseload that was well into the thousands. I didn't do it simply for the reward, but the satisfaction of knowing I was making the streets safer and even on occasion helping someone who's gone astray get back on the right track. Because that's what it's all about, giving back. This is my way of giving back to the business that I've loved for 50 plus years and that I was in for 30 years and still to this day at my home company at Paradise Alley Pro Wrestling. Paul Roma, Mario Mancini, Paul Perez, Big Steve Tracy, also a bounty hunter under the tutelage of Dr. D. David Schultz. You see, it's all connected. We're all connected. Stay with like-minded people and you'll know what I'm talking about. Stay mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually fit, because if he's for us, no one can be against us. And that's why I praise our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ every day of my life. In order to get respect, you have to start with respecting yourself. Once you do that, you open other people's minds to respecting you. Because there's three types of people in this world. Those who don't know what happened. Those who wonder what happened. And people like the Midnight G.O.C. Ryder that make things happen. There's always a rearview mirror there. And it's smaller for a reason. Because you look back. You remember it. You honor it. You respect it. And you become thankful, humble, and blessed for those who paved the way before you. But without that small rear view mirror, you can't get to where you are. And you certainly won't get to where you're going. No one's saying stay stuck in the past. Honor it. And then look at that big wild windshield. Step on the pedal. And it's full speed ahead. Do you understand what I'm talking about here today? Your notebooks better be out. Hello? McFly? Is anybody home? I'm going to tell you the story of my life from the dirt poor beginnings to my thrilling and not so thrilling days as one of the nation's top bounty hunters. I'll give you a few wrestling stories, but in the end, you're going to find Dr. D is more, much more, than just a guy, a pro wrestler, who gave John Stossel what was coming to him. I'm the guy who always gets his man. This isn't make-believe. There's nothing or phony or fake here. I am the real deal. And then I'll say that to say this. Because I tell it like it is. Don't you dare miss it.